Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Talk About the Show, where I talk about whatever it is I want to talk about. And today I'm talking about a game that I didn't ever really see myself talking about, and that is Mafia the Old Country. Now, for me personally, I've never actually played any of the Mafia games. However, with the Old Country soon coming up, I am using that as an excuse to play the original 3 games. Although I do understand that the Old Country is a prequel, so I don't necessarily have to play the other 3. It is more so just my excuse to finally play those games that I've not had a chance to play yet. And because I never really played any of the Mafia games before, I didn't expect myself to talk about Mafia the Old Country leading to its release. But surprising just about everyone, I feel, Mafia the Old Country very well seems like it could be the game that changes the entirety of the games industry moving forward. And now I know what you're thinking, that sounds like an awful lot of big words to put on this game. And I don't really mean it in the sense that people are going to be looking at Mafia the Old Country and saying, oh, this is the game that everyone needs to be trying to strive towards. Every game needs to look at Mafia the Old Country and be more like it. No, not like that at all. What I mean in Mafia the Old Country potentially changing up, shaking up the entire games industry is the fact that this brand new entry in a AAA franchise, a storied AAA franchise, a brand new full-on entry is listed at $50, which is insane. $50 for Mafia the Old Country, a brand new entry in the Mafia franchise, a game franchise that has existed for, I want to say, well over a decade, maybe even close to 2 decades at this point. As I've mentioned before, I'm not very well versed on the franchise, but I understand how much of an impact it has had. There's quite the fan base for Mafia, and the newest entry is $50, not $70, which has become the norm for a AAA game released on this generation of consoles. And for those of you who may not quite understand why I think this is a big deal for the entirety of the games industry, the fact is, for the entirety of this generation, the $50 price tag on video games have been looked at as a quote-unquote budget title. When Miles Morales released on PS5 for $50, people were like, oh, that makes sense. It's a smaller Spider-Man game. It's not Spider-Man 2. It's like a little smaller game in between Spider-Man 1 and Spider-Man 2. So yeah, $50, that adds up quite nicely in a lot of people's eyes. And then we just recently had Claire Obscure Expedition 33 also released at $50. And people were thinking, oh, that makes sense. It's this indie studio's first game. They've talked about how it's a JRPG that isn't overly long, so it's a smaller game that's made by an indie studio. $50, that sounds about right. Of course, we would then find out that this game is pretty big deal, and it's only $50. But for the longest time, the $50 price tag on games has been seen as lesser than, not necessarily the norm, and is meant for quote-unquote budget games. With Mafia the Old Country being $50 at launch, this AAA game from arguably one of the greediest publishers out there, with 2K being behind it. I mean, just take a look at any of their previous sports games and how atrocious all of the virtual currency is in microtransactions. It's kind of crazy, and they keep getting away with it too. How do we let that happen? I don't know. I don't play sports games, but a lot of people do, and they don't seem to mind, but that's besides the point. All of that to say that 2K is one of the greediest publishers, and they're releasing this brand new game, this brand new AAA game for $50 in one of their tried and true franchises for $50, which then kind of opens up this whole new world where it's just like, wait, we don't have to make AAA games for $70? We don't have to charge that much for it? And the biggest reason that Mafia the Old Country is retailing at $50 as opposed to the standardized $70 or even the newly announced $80 price tag that some games are going to have this holiday season and beyond, Mafia the Old Country has been very open with saying that this game is going to be linear. We aren't going to have this massive open world that, by all accounts I've heard, Mafia has never really needed to have an open world. And in fact, a lot of people have said that their open worlds have distracted from their otherwise extremely great narratives, and the open world only stood to drag down the overall experience as opposed to lift it up in a sort of sense. So all of that to say that Mafia the Old Country is being a focused game, a focused linear narrative game that is $50, which is incredible. because of how in recent years, this entire generation, I would argue, more and more developers have been like, how can we make this game bigger? More and more developers have been trying to make their game bigger and just as big as possible, all in an effort to sort of keep the players engaged and keep players playing their games so that they could potentially down the line release microtransactions that those engaged players would buy up, or DLC packs that those already engaged players would continue to buy and continue to just have more income out of this one $70 game already. A lot of games are doing that this generation, I feel. So for Mafia the Old Country to be like, no, we're not going to be bigger just to be bigger. We're going to be smaller and more focused, and our price tag is going to reflect that. And I really do feel like that this game specifically is going to benefit so much from that. Because if you look at a game like Clair Obscur Expedition 33, which recently launched at $50 as we mentioned earlier, that game sold, last time I checked, over 2 million copies already. Of course, because of its good word of mouth and great reviews, and because of that $50 price tag being a lot more alluring than $70. In a time where everything is costing more and more, it gets harder and harder to prioritize our hobbies, our entertainment, when those prices are also increasing. So to have a $50 game released at a time where you're paying more attention to your wallets than ever, I feel, that really does help you stand out above any other game that is $70 and could be a lesser experience. And the sentiment I've been seeing around Mafia the Old Country is how excited people are about it not having this open world. Like, just looking over on Blue Sky and seeing people's reaction to it being non-open world, people are just saying, man, it's so great to have a linear story again. And the sentiment a lot of people are having is that we're tired of open world games, because so many games are open world these days, to the point where, you know, maybe sometimes you don't finish every game because they're all open world and they all demand so much time from you. Mafia the Old Country, it isn't doing that. And that is to be celebrated. And I know earlier I mentioned that this is going to like change the entire games industry, and that still remains to be seen. Obviously, it's just been announced, it's not even out yet. But for it to be a 2K published video game, one of the triplest of A video game publishers I can think of, I think this really sends quite the message to the entire industry, I feel. Again, we don't know for certain, but this is just where I'm coming from. The fact that they are putting out a game, a AAA game in one of their tried and true franchises for $50, I hope it makes every other publisher in the industry look at that and be like, we could do that. We could make a smaller, more focused narrative game, just a game that is more focused, and sell it for not $70, not even $80, which is what a lot of people are trying to aim towards these days. Because let's face it, not every game needs to be $80. You look at a game like Grand Theft Auto 6, yeah, that should be $80. I understand whenever they announce the price on that, and if it's $80, obviously, and even if it's more than that, I could completely understand that as well. But there have been so many other games across the years that would have done better had they sold at a lower price point than the standardized 70. I don't know why, but for some reason the game Forspoken comes to mind as a game that should have been $50. And now that isn't to say that Forspoken would be completely saved because it's $50. Definitely not. That game had an array of other issues other than its price tag. More games that come to mind, though, that would have benefited from having a $50 price tag are things like Immortals of Avium, or the Callisto Protocol, or even Skull and Bones. What was Ubisoft thinking, releasing that game at a full $70 with Ultimate Editions that brought it up to like $120? It's ridiculous. But specifically talking about Immortals of Avium and the Callisto Protocol, both of which were games developed by studios that were spun off of, you know, larger studios that left those big studios to form their own thing. Those games would have benefited greatly from being $50, because it is a lot easier to ask for $50 than $70 on a brand new IP, on a brand new title. And I completely understand why at the time they didn't go with the $50 price tag, because it was seen at the time as a lesser product. But I think it's very clear to say that times are changing, and the lower price tag is only that much more alluring to customers, because $70 is a lot of money, and $80 is pushing it a little too far. So when a game comes out and is $50, yeah, we're gonna celebrate that. Yeah, if you weren't gonna buy it before, you might be buying it now. I know I was always looking forward to it because I've heard great things about the Mafia franchise, so I was looking forward to the Old Country. But now I'm like, well, now I definitely want to buy it. I was going to buy it before, but now I'm looking at the deluxe edition, which is $60, which is still less than the quote unquote standard price for video games these days. That's really awesome. And honestly, that's the best thing that Mafia the Old Country could have done for itself, because like I said, so many games are going up in price. For this to come out and be $50, that is so much more enticing to so many people, and you're getting so much good press right now because people are very excited about spending less for great games. And this has the potential to be a great game, and more people are just going to be into it because of the price tag. And that's just great for the franchise and great for players. And I'm still just in awe. I am so shocked that it's 2K of all publishers who's doing this. I look at publishers like Xbox, and they still do release games like South of Midnight for $40. But when you look at South of Midnight, that was always scoped as a quote unquote smaller game. So $40 makes sense for that game. If they release Avowed for $60 or even $50, I think people would have had a very different tune when that game came out. And now Xbox is out here trying to say, oh, all of our games are going to be $80 going forward. No. Don't get me wrong. I love Xbox. My Xbox is my preferred platform of choice, but they do not have the track record to be releasing games at $80. If anything, the only game that they could release at $80 is Call of Duty. That's the game that they could do it and get away with. Any other game, I feel like, needs to be looked at more on a scale, you know? Start at the $50 range and work your way up to, I guess, the $80 range if you want. A game like Doom: The Dark Ages, yeah, $70, I understand. A game like Avowed, I would understand 60. 60 would make a lot of sense to me. And, you know, and remember Redfall? Redfall was Xbox's first $70 title. No, just no. Really, sometimes you gotta look at the product that is being created and price it accordingly, not just stick to the arbitrary number that we've all decided on. And I feel like Mafia the Old Country is breaking that boundary in a way that other games just haven't quite done yet, with it being this AAA game that is $50. Because Mario Kart brought everything up to $80, and of course a lot of publishers are gonna be like, oh, we gotta scramble for the $80 to squeeze more money out of everyone. But for Mafia to be $50 and for Claire Obscure Expedition 33 to be $50, there are so many great experiences that you can have. It is being made explicitly clear that video games can be great and be sold at $50. So people are going to want that more. You know what I'm saying? I hope that made sense. You look at a game like Ghost of Yotei as well, a game I feel like had they waited like a week or two to announce its release date and pre-order date and all that stuff, I feel like that would have been $80. If Xbox had said, oh, our games this holiday season, they're going to be $80. If that press release had come out before Ghost of Yotei was up for pre-orders, I can guarantee you that would have been $80 because it's PlayStation's big AAA single player game, and that's their bag, you know? It's surprising to me that it is $70. Like, I can't imagine them changing that. I hope they don't. They would get a lot of bad press if they did that. And when you look at a game like Ghost of Yotei, $70 makes sense. But a game like Marathon releasing fairly close to it, I don't know if it has an official price tag attached to it yet, but that definitely shouldn't be $70 full dollars. If anything, $50 max. Honestly, I'm so surprised to say, but 2K is showing everyone else how it should be done. Yeah, so my excitement levels for Mafia the Old Country has gone up exceptionally, like a lot more. And also, I feel like I said Mafia the Old Country way too many times throughout this video. I could have just said the Old Country, or I could have just said the new Mafia game, but I said Mafia the Old Country a lot. And I'll say it again real quick right now. Mafia the Old Country releases this August, and I am looking forward to it very much so now. And I feel like a lot of people are too, because of this news. Had this game come out at $70, people would probably be like, nah, it looks cool, but $70? I don't really know. Oh, this game looks cool and it's only $50? All right, I'll bite. And that's what this industry needs more of. In a time where everything is going up in price, take a chance, you know, lower your price. That'll be so much more enticing to so many more people, and you could get a very big audience in that way. And that's it for this episode of Talk About. Let me know what you think in the comments below of Mafia the Old Country being priced at $50 and how this may affect the entire games industry going forward, if you think it will, if you think it won't. Maybe I'm just dreaming, you know? It's very possible. Let me know what you think about all that in the comments below. And if you like this video, prove it by hitting the like button. If I didn't say that, you should do it. And if you want to see more content from this channel as it posts, make sure you hit the subscribe button. That way you'll see it when it happens. And hit the bell so you'll be notified when it happens as well. Yeah, and that'll do it for today's video. Thanks for stopping by. And until next time, as always, stay safe and play some video games.